This smoothie's hella good. What up, y'all? This is your guy Marcellus Ease. I'm gonna be shooting straight from the hip. We got a few topics to cover right here. Before I touch base on this most def making comments about Drake, we're gonna dive deep into this. Oh my god, fellas. I've been fiending to get deep into this. First of all, we gotta remember where Drake came from. The camp he came out of. And I seen this little doc right here, and it kind of reminded me of the whole J Dilla Common from, like, I would say the early 2000s and the 90s. I don't really know too much about that era before then, but I know me personally, I like Kanye West after I learned about J Dilla. That's how I kind of like got molded into the whole Kanye West thing. It wasn't off of College Dropout or Late Registration. It was really off that like kind of J Dilla kind of tree where Dave Chappelle even hosted like an open block party. When I saw Kanye West with Dave Chappelle, that was like the stamp of approval. It was like, okay, I know Dave Chappelle fuck with like that sort of, I would say, guys coming off that tree. It was like real hip hop. So I saw Dave standing next to Kanye. I'm like, oh, Kanye got to be one of those types of dudes too. But here's a quick documentary right here. This is a dope channel, Digging the Crates.
In the late 90s, Questlove helped found a collective of musicians and artists, including D'Angelo, James Poyser, J Dilla, Erykah Badu, Bilal, and others like Q-Tip, Talib Kweli, and Pino Palladino. They were dubbed somewhat accidentally the Soulquestrians, and this collection of albums is some of the best music ever recorded, and it's influenced so much music in completely different genres since. Today I'm talking all about the Soulquestrians, D'Angelo, Erykah Badu, Common, J Dilla, The Roots, etc.
Now, Drake is off this same tree. Even though Kanye was a few years ahead of Drake, Drake is off this same tree. Matter of fact, I'm gonna actually prove it to you guys right here. Let me mute them instrumentals. I'm gonna show you right here. Now, Drake even did a song after his first album dropped, and this track came out with I believe Fonte from Little Brother. It's called My New, aka My New Shit. But Drake was spitting on this. He was spitting. I'm gonna play a little snippet. Hopefully I don't get copyrighted. Remember, he's doing a song with Little Brother. I mean, this is like boom bat. I don't want to say it's boom bat, but it's off that like kind of, what's his name? Q-Tip. It's off that Q-Tip tree, and that whole movement, the Soulquarians, that whole movement is off of that like Q-Tip and Tribe Called Quest tree. It got like revolutionized with more soul in it. Erykah Badu, but Drake was spitting, man. Drake used to spit.
Tribe Called Quest, but when you call too much, then I call less. You would always complain about my small text, but what you call conversation, I call stress. And that put a barrier between both of our carriers, and I would be like, I ain't getting service in your area.
Okay, I can't play all of it, but he was getting to his bag, and then he even dropped tracks with KOS, man. Like, this guy used to really come off that like J Dilla, Common, D'Angelo, Erykah Badu type of tree.
Like I left the water on, I'll run this bitch if anybody asks. Ain't much changed since high school, niggas.
Remember, Drake already dropped his mixtape. He's already kind of getting commercialized, and he's still yet dropping these type of tracks.
They'll be in and out of class, S-Class, or the brand new CL5 on them haters. Black paint,
ooh, that boy flowing.
Color as the logo for the Raiders. I just said that cause I'm out in California in the studio with Taz. You should give us credit, niggas killing people. We could all be doing that instead.
All right. And he even did a part 2. It's called Faith Part 2 with KOS. All these guys are like backpack rappers. Oh, that's what they used to call them, but they're off that, once again, that J Dilla tree.
We'll be here when I ain't rich. I swear, I know. They are in the boat I row. Everybody in it got a paddle. And motherfucker won't let go. I done made $100,000 a season. I was on that show.
That's kind of crazy. You hear Drake back then versus now. It's a huge difference. It's a huge difference. But I'm going to go to the most def comments. But before I do that, once again, I actually want to go to Math Hoffer. he actually has a guy on his show. This guy does I believe he used to work for the Soul no, not the Soul. I'm tweaking. The Source magazine. He used to work for the Source magazine. He talked about how he used to vouch for the backpacker guys. Well, I gotta stop saying the backpacker guys. I would say the guys off this tree. It was sort of like a movement along with Mos Def, Black Thought. He used to vouch for them, so they did 2 different magazine covers. He kind of alludes how, like, in a way, even though everyone knew that was the real music, it was such a niche. And he has like kind of like I want to say he has a first-hand experience from a sales standpoint for working for a company that niche is very small. I'm about to play for you guys right now.
My point is, Kanye, being who he was running with, being who he was around, was also a producer, man.
Yes.
And he made beats for some of the biggest lifestyle
That's
rappers
why I say
out.
I think he would have been the bridge because
He's a bridge, but he can't be the bridge if you sign to the biggest rapper.
Right.
The nigga who says, truthfully, I want to rhyme like Common Sense, but I sold 5 mil. I ain't rhyme like Common Sense.
And that's in a way Drake right now. Drake, he took the money. He could spit like Mos and others. And I think that's where Mos and other people are kind of like disappointed that he went like the commercial route. He kind of dumbed himself down in order to make sales, but that's part of the game. But right here, this guy from the Source, I forgot his name, but he's gonna prove to you like that whole you're a real rapper spitting bars is such a niche audience and it doesn't sell. He's gonna prove it to you right here. Remember, he used to work for the Source magazine.
If Diddy had gone and signed Mos Def, if Diddy had gone and signed, if they'd have treated that element the same way they treated the Harlem,
yes.
Okay, well,
that makes more sense.
He got this Kanye dude popping. We got to get one of these niggas. Who else is out here?
Nobody took Faramond.
We got to get
when he had the Nate Dogg record.
They didn't treat it like
that. He said Pharoah Monch. I forgot he was part of that crew. And that guy has some hits. Like all these guys, like you wonder, like none of them were really guys who made sales or impact in the whole, I would say, music industry commercially as a whole. They didn't really have any impact. But once again, this guy's about to prove like it's such a niche audience.
They treated Kanye like a wonder.
Facts, exactly.
And they just let him rock.
They only wanted Kanye.
They did have a label.
Because he could bring beats with them.
They did have a label that was hot.
Get by remix.
And right here, they're arguing of why some people at the record labels thought Kanye was a one-off. They didn't want to dive deep into that whole kind of Questlove or type of Common type bag. They didn't want to dive deep into those rappers and build up another one. They just knew it was such a niche.
But he brought beats with him.
Ruckus was hot at that.
That is produced by Kanye.
But bro,
it did not come close.
Ruckus. Pharoah Monch.
You talking to the wrong dude.
And Pharoah Monch had a big record deal too.
I was at the Source when we did the competition. When the competition happened, I was the only backpacker in the office running around screaming about y'all showing all this love to the lifestyle.
That's when they thrived at on the Source albums that they used to put out.
We ended up doing a cover. They ended up doing a cover, and I don't know.
He's gonna get into his bag right here about it.
I won't say this was to spite me specifically, but I think I made so much noise they felt like maybe this is something we need to address. Remember how the Source used to do 2 covers?
Yes.
They did one cover mainstream. They did another cover underground. The mainstream cover was Q-Tip. He had Vibrant Thing out at the time.
He might be the big dog backpack rapper. I ain't gonna lie. Now I'm thinking about it. That's Q-Tip. He might be
super record. And then the other cover was Mos Def, Black Thought, and Pharoah Monch.
Yeah, I remember that cover.
Simon Says, Mrs. Fat Booty, and The Roots at the same time. Yeah. Bro, that cover got destroyed. Destroyed. It was almost 3-1. 3 motherfuckers would buy the Q-Tip cover and completely fucking the bill. Maybe one dude might pick up the other thing. That was the tipping point right there. I had to shut the fuck up in the office for the rest of the year. I couldn't say shit.
Wow.
You think Q-Tip was like an exception because of Tribe and their contribution already?
Yeah.
Now right there, that's crazy because he named 3 big records. Mos Def, Miss Fat Booty. Once again, I was a real youngin at the time. I don't really know anything about these records, but I still hear them to today. These are like really big records, but for that backpacker movement at the time, they had a lot of momentum. and for Q-Tip to still outsell them. So that guy had proof working for I wouldn't say working for the labels, but working for a huge magazine that was part of the culture that had to make sales. They had to make sales to justify their ads. Okay, so now we're gonna go to the Mos Def comments in this interview. Yo, shout out to the young lady that did the interview. She killed it right here. I'm gonna shout her out here. You guys check out her channel, The Cutting Room Floor. I mean, this is huge to even get Mos to come out and say this.
Like, is Drake hip hop? I know.
Damn, that
Drake
because
is
we're here
pop.
for truth. We're here for
Drake
truth.
Drake is pop to me.
Right, that's fair. In the sense that it's charting like pop music, popular music.
It's charting because Drake is the algorithm of the music industry. That's the craziest part. He came up when the streaming services were just getting built. So he's almost built into their system, similar to the way Joe Rogan is built into Spotify. He doesn't even have a RSS feed like other podcasts do, those links. He's straight up built into their system. I mean, you could be on a flight and try to listen to his podcast. I don't even think you could download it. You have to hear it with the ads. It has to be tracked. He's built into their system the same way Drake is. When Drake has a release, he's on everyone's feed. Hey, listen to Drake, da-da-da-da. Like, people not even fans of hip hop, they get the same ads on their algorithms, whether they're on Spotify, Apple Music, Amazon, wherever. Drake is built in. That's one thing a lot of people overlook. It's like, yo, he came up at the perfect time. Even Lil Wayne didn't get that grace of being built into the streaming system.
I was in Target in Houston and I heard a Drake song. So it feels like a lot of his music is compatible with shopping.
Commercial music.
Or it's
Commercial music, yeah.
shopping with an edge in certain instances. Or
Fair. I like Drake's music, but I understand exactly what you're saying.
of course, I mean, I
It's
get
commercial, entertaining, fun, good,
it's
formulaic music.
it's likable.
Likable music, yeah.
Remember how we heard him earlier? We heard Drake spitting. He was flowing. He was in his flow. But that's not what we're getting today. It's crazy just listening back to what I played earlier. It sounds like a complete different person. Like, he was flowing. What he's doing now, I don't want to say he's still not in his bag with the rhymes, but it's really lazy. It's almost like he's Stephen Curry just doing layups all day. You know what I'm saying? Like, he could take the 3-point shots, he could do crazy crossovers, but he's just settling for just like layups. You know what I'm saying? Like, this shit is too easy. It's too easy for Drake, and I feel like a guy like Mos Def, who's multi-layered, especially with the bars, man, he could just see right through it.
It's likable.
But is it? I'm gonna leave you alone. We're gonna move on.
Woo! So many products. So
many SKUs.
So many SKUs. Look.
And so many SKUs in that music video he did for Laugh Now, Cry Later. That whole thing was a Nike ad. I mean, just when have you seen a rapper drop a whole music video that was straight up an ad? But once again, he's built into the system of the overall music industry. I don't fault him either, because before he got his current deal, he was signed to like 5 people. So all those tours and radio hits throughout the years, he may have a very small ownership in that previous work. So he's just about to get out a bunch of like B-side records that are not even that good and just kind of flood the market, because maybe he has like a 10 album deal. So he's trying to get through that.
Look at all these SKUs. Oh, so many products.
So much merchandising, so many barcodes.
I love this mall. Look at this place. I mean, look at this place. They have everything. Everything's here. They have everything here. Ah, this is great. This is a new Drake. You hear it? It's great. Okay. What happens when this thing collapses?
This dude's gonna get paid. Regardless, he's built in. He don't get paid regardless, and he's out. I mean, when the thing collapses, I mean, does he mean the genre overall? Because yeah, the genre right now is fully getting pimped out. It's fully getting pimped out. Maybe most means it that way, but most is talking a lot of code, man. But I don't fault Drake for going commercial. I just don't see the other guys off that Jay Dilla tree just eating as much as him. But there is a graceful way of doing it. It's just, I don't know. It's been a lot of Drake noise. It's been a lot of Drake noise, man, ever since he dropped that last album. Between Joe Budden, this Mos Def incident, and just people critiquing the album, man. Like, this is the noise is kind of getting loud, man. They're throwing stones at the glass house right now. And the kid with the Midas touch, he has to react.
This is the thing that we're talking about. It's like nobody wants to talk about. It's like, what happens when the columns start buckling? Are we not in some early stage of that at this present hour? Are we seeing like the collapse of the empire? Buying and selling. Where's the message that I can use?
Right.
You know, what's in it for your audience apart from being like banging the pom-poms?
But for sure, this is definitely unprecedented. What Drake actually is, if you take a step back and really look at it. We all know they say, hey, every artist, the Spotify payout is like point something of a penny, which it doesn't really add up. But at the same time, best believe Drake does not have that deal. He has a fully guaranteed deal. I don't know if he's getting back end payment directly from Spotify as far as ownership shares, or just they're gonna just give him a one-time fee for at least not going independent. Because had he took that route, he could have really destroyed the whole music industry. He could have put them really on their heads. So right here, I'm about to queue up a little conversation. And for episode 1, it seems like I'm kind of getting into the little music bag. But in a way, this is like music, kind of tech involved a little bit of culture. We got to sprinkle in a little bit of everything. But this was a dope conversation right here as at this show, these two guys had a sit down. It's called Money for Nothing. And they were actually talking about how with Spotify adjusting their new payment system, that this is actually an adjustment by the record labels for making sure that they have huge market share of Spotify. So they want most of the overall Spotify audience to be listening to music from their labels. But the more filler of, you know, people coming in from DistroKid or other kind of services where these artists are independent, it brings down their market share. So they can go from having about, I don't know, 95% of listenership that's listening to their music, but the more independent artists that come in with only a few hundred streams, their percentages get lower and lower. So they believe that the record labels may have forced Spotify to adjust how they pay out for smaller artists. That way they can maintain their market share, especially going into negotiations with Spotify, as they've been trying to pivot around to getting to podcasts, audiobooks, and other audio forms. They're trying to really pivot away from the record label. So it's like a battle within a battle. But these two had a nice sit down. You guys check it out, and every once in a while, I'm gonna definitely check in.
Important changes. I think this set of changes is really, really important because of what it tells us about the relationship between Spotify and the music industry. What it tells us about how people are positioning for kind of this, what's coming next in the music industry. And what you were saying before is that this is this like, the first real move in kind of a soft around the edges beginning, a reconstruction of like the fundamental mechanics of the streaming industry as we've known them for the past decade. And so, yeah, so for one, I think that this like under 1,000 demonetization thing, which I do not believe actually hits songwriters. So the publishing rights still get paid out, but it's the master rights. The loser here, right, actually, in terms of who maybe makes money, is not songwriters, because like I think it's like ideologically, yes, everyone who should get paid, and like fundamentally it's totally messed up that like you can like platform, like you can network effect like terms of service tyranny, if that makes any sense. Like if you want your stuff to be, if you want to be a real musician and widely accessible, except in a handful of like genres or scenes, like you need to be on Spotify, and therefore Spotify can say anything it wants in its terms of service, and you sort of have to do it, because they can just say like, well, if you don't want to do that, you don't have to be on Spotify. And you're like, well, you do need to be on Spotify. It's like has an element of the public square. It just happens to be a mall, which is a privately owned public square.
It happened to be a mall where people have to sell their music, but at the same time, that mall is being approached by the mafia every once in a while and is getting extorted, aka that's the record labels.
So they like it is a big deal ideologically speaking, but I think that in terms of industry mechanics, this is like a tactical strike on the distributors, and on the indie distributors in particular, like DistroKid, CD Baby, TuneCore, etc. And we've talked in previous episodes about Spotify, kind of about the declining percentage of major label music on the streaming service, and the way that might be shifting the kinds of negotiated leverage between the majors and the DSPs, digital service providers like Spotify. And right, so like the basic thing is, as you were saying, Saxon, like they have the Spotify kind of has to do what the majors want, because in order to be a functional streaming service, you need the IP that only they can provide. But there's some wiggle room where if it's 95% major labels, Strong's being streamed, like, yeah, you have to do what they say. But if it's 80%, maybe not as much. And if it's, this is Majors plus Merlin, which is the big, we did an episode about this, is the big kind of indie clearinghouse, if you will. Like, if it's 70, if it's 60, at a certain point, you get more leverage, because you're like, guys, you're just not as much of our business as you used to be.
And I believe that's eventually going to happen to the labels, because the more and more years go by, all those classic songs that they have, that generation is not really going to Spotify to hear those songs. They most likely have the albums already or the vinyls. And the younger generation coming in, they're just not going to really go to Spotify to listen to a classic Beatles fucking track. Come on, let's keep it a buck here. And with the overall narrative every single year is that, hey, don't sign a record deal, they're going to screw you. The labels, in a way, they can't let that noise get too loud, because it's going to discourage a lot of people from signing up when they realize they have to already bring in their fan base, produce the music themselves, and basically the money the labels loan you is for you to actually provide them with at least 8 to 10 albums.
Maybe we can like renegotiate some of those rates. Maybe we can finally have like a functional business.
Well, so this is interesting, and maybe you can like kind of break this down for me, because actually I did read about this as well, and like we haven't discussed it before the show, and I think it'd be beneficial to the listeners actually if we kind of explain this, because I agree that it does align with also like what Lucian Grange and like the big labels like want. In fact, there's actually even a quote on, I guess, like some investors call or something. Grange was quoted as saying that those groups that have expressed a concern about a quote unquote artist-centric streaming royalty model, which is basically what Grange supports, are unsurprisingly those whose business model is based on being merchants of garbage. Sorry, I really can't think of another word for the content that no one actually wants to listen to. And then later said, if you're committing fraud to flooding the platforms with content that have absolutely no engagement with fans, that doesn't help churn, that doesn't merchandise great music and professional artists, then I suppose you're not going to be in favor of an artist-centric model.
So who the hell is signing professional artists? That same label record exec, the label that he's on, they don't sign professional artists. They just sign people that went viral. So him trying to act like a journalist, you know how the journalist goes, oh, there's no ethics in journalism anymore. But it's like, half your industry is in entertainment. The same way the music business now is it's really, I don't want to say it's a clown show or the artists are gestures, but they're really signing people that kind of are known for things outside of the music. But to act like you have some integrity, oh, it's about the art, don't flood the market with these bullshit artists. It's like, in a way, your artist is bullshit, except you have them plugged in to your playlist on the platform.
Music Business Worldwide said that Grange was primarily directing his ire over companies who flood platforms with content, such as you mentioned, DistroKid, CD Baby, and TuneCore. And so my understanding is that that's because those DIY, quote-unquote, distribution services are, like, have an open door policy. Like, they're not discerning about, like, who they, like, are distributing.
Yeah.
So it is interesting.
And the labels don't like that. And it seems like with these rules, Spotify, well, they're forcing Spotify to tighten up on that. And at the same time, we got to be careful the way they're labeling everything nowadays as content. That is that's a kind of a corporate ploy in a way to kind of downgrade everything, because you could make a blockbuster film in Hollywood that has like a $500 million budget, and then versus someone that just made a TikTok video and they label it the same thing, content. That is one of the greatest finesses of all time, to just label everything the same thing, content. But meanwhile, someone just paid a ton of money to produce an album with instrumentation, and you're just labeling it content. The same way someone just lift up their phone and film themselves. It's not the same thing.
So that's the reason why why this is kind of like shots fired at these sort of like quote unquote DIY distribution services.
And to be very clear, when Lucian Grange says artist-centered, he does not mean like on behalf of musicians. He means like a vision where certain musicians certain music is like artistically viable, and it has a certain set of payout structures associated with it, and other sounds are sounds, and like they're not considered music, and they don't have the same kind of IP or payout structure. So in some way he's trying to like you could say like there's a tension between like a YouTube world and a record store. A record store, everything's produced by a label of some kind and it's all music. YouTube world, music is just more content, and it doesn't actually matter whether or not like it's a song or sounds like, or a deep, I sometimes work with like a deep pink noise hum YouTube video, and they get,
in a way, if you think about it, that can actually destroy the record labels. I mean, out of all the money they spent being plugged into the platform, all the playlists, just everyone kind of uploading, I would say democratized platforms like YouTube pretty much destroy their whole business model, because the music industry as a whole, it operates like the mafia. They control everything from the arenas you get to perform at, the promoters, the clothes you sell, the CD stores, the storage, everything. They've 360'd the whole game. And I believe a lot of independent artists that get popular on their own, and they're figuring out, hey, all these venues have promoters that kind of work under maybe the UMG umbrella. I mean, once again, democratized platforms like YouTube, it kind of destroys the record label's ability to 360 the whole game. And at the same time, Spotify on the other end is coming in and is like, hey, all this extra content that's being flooded into the platforms is actually killing your market share. Even though you own Drake, Madonna, Prince, Elvis, Michael Jackson, but those artists combined is not gonna hold you enough market share to avoid the flood of millions and millions of people just hitting the upload button and coming into the platform. So we're trying to pay you less every year. The record label sense it, and Spotify at the same time, they're trying to get out of that. Like I said, that relationship between Spotify and just even Apple Music, just all these streaming platforms and the record labels is almost as if the streaming platforms have a storefront and they're getting extorted by the mob. But except the mob doesn't realize that, hey, this is the 21st century you can't just extort Starbucks. That's like walking into Starbucks like, hey, I'm gonna extort you guys. Give me the cash or give me 10% of your sales. It's like, nah, the manager gotta respond to corporate. You can't just take 10% of the sale.
They get payouts for that, right? It's
Right.
ad supported, and it's ad supported. I think in most of these channels function the same way. I mean, some of them have specific relationships with YouTube, but that's a different story. And so he's kind of saying by artist-centric streaming or artist-centric model, he's talking about like artists as defined by the music industry, which is like a record industry. And yeah, so I think that is exactly right. When these companies are flooding the market with garbage, they let anyone throw stuff in, and some of that is like a million cat sounds or whatever, and some of that is a million like 13-year-old SoundCloud rappers who want their stuff on Spotify or whatever. But I think what you see there is, and there had been, right, a very clear downward trend on the market share within platforms like Spotify of the majors, as no, most of these get 500 plays, let's say. I mean, they don't even, but let's say, you could have a huge, but there is this long tail where all of a sudden, if you have enough tracks that have 500 plays, especially if they're kind of being fed in an increasingly algorithmically structured listening environment, so there is an ability to have discovery across the bounds of notoriety, maybe like you could be in nowhere, but like if you just fit right with an algorithm, you could start getting a little bit of traction. All of a sudden that long tail could start to create real leverage and a kind of
as we're seeing in the numbers,
as we were seeing in the numbers. So for me, this is shocking, honestly, because my read on the situation had been, surely Spotify is pro distribution services because this, like, they need to have more leverage against the majors. And this very much felt to me like Lucian Grange said jump and Spotify said how high, sir.
Yeah, I mean, completely, for sure.
Completely.
And it's Spotify's fault that they're in this position, because when they initially started their platform, they could have did what SoundCloud did. Had they just started out like with that and just leave the music industry out of it, all the old records that were record label controlled, leave it to them to sell it. If they just started off fresh and trusted the new generation would come in with music being valuable, then their platform will be basically YouTube right now, except for music. But instead, they went to bed with the record labels where 77% of their profit goes to the labels. I don't even know how the hell they're running their business right now. We see them with making major cuts every quarter. Money isn't cheap anymore with these interest rates. Shit is being shaken up at Spotify, and they're trying to pivot bad. The podcast shit didn't really work out for them, and they're trying to pivot. They're going into audio books. God damn, this smoothie is good. Got a little shit on my throat, but yeah, but they try to pivot and go into audiobooks, and it didn't really work out for them. So they're trying to find any way to leverage of not giving the record labels the money that they want. And the record labels, how they really operate is off of market share. They'll go like, we have Drake, Madonna, Rihanna, UMG. We're under this one umbrella. We have at least 60% of the music that's most valuable in the marketplace. They're just in an acquisition phase, the same way Spotify in a way does acquisition for audiences. They may sign Joe Rogan, but they're really inquiring about his audience. That's what that 200 million is for. So it's a different game that these entities are playing. Different game, and they all sort of operate like McDonald's. You think McDonald's sells burgers or that's primarily their business, when they're really just franchising and they just own a bunch of real estate.
The way that I think is fascinating, because what it suggests is that really this company, which has not been having a great year, which had its pivot to podcasts, which didn't end up, for a variety of reasons, didn't end up paying out the way it did, though I still think made sense as a strategy. Like, it seems to me that you need to get leverage against these companies that are willing to just have total power over you. But this seems like they just totally capitulated in a way that's gonna, can't imagine it doesn't cut off a lot of that long tail growth.
And I think that like probably, I mean, maybe this is something we can kind of talk about a little bit, is that it's doing that because as we've seen over the years, basically Spotify has been trying to like Spotify's been trying to like squirm its way out from underneath the pressure of the major labels. Like, we're going into audiobooks, we're going into podcasting, all this. None of it's fucking worked. It is the defining like source of like listening to music in like at least the Western world right now. And I mean, and you know, obviously we don't need, this is obvious, but obviously, you know, streaming music makes up like 84% of like all, you know, streaming music makes up like 84% of like how we consume our music now, or some, you know, opposed to like physical sales or downloading MP3s. Yo, real heads out there downloading MP3s, shout out to you. So like obviously like it realizes it's the dominant.
At some point, when Spotify and all the other streaming services start raising the price and you find yourself spending $20 a month for music you barely listen to, yeah, I guess those MP3 heads might come out on top, or just people who purchased the raw album or maybe the vinyl. But at some point, the streaming service is gonna have you almost buying 2 albums a month. It's gonna be $20 plus.
It's a dominating platform for like streaming music, and it like wants to maintain its longevity. I don't know, maybe someday fucking earn a fucking profit. Anyways, but like I think it's basically at this point where it's like, okay, we just need to like play the game they want us to play.
Yeah, I guess. I mean, it's
maybe
that's
I don't know. Maybe that's
fascinating, right? Because it does seem like after a couple of years in which the only way I think to read the podcasting push in Spotify was as a way to, you know, we're not a music company, they said, we're an audio company, right? So there was a real, like, not just a little bit, a real push to get out of the major label thumbs. And this just seems like I said, like a total capitulation in a fascinating way. And a capitulation also, and this is the question here is why, right? And there's a couple of reasons. I don't really know, but there's a couple of reasons I can think about, right? Which is, one is what they're doing here is really important. In addition to the inter-industrial story, it's really important, like for the reason that you said before, which is that we're starting to see just a little bit around the edges a restructuring of the basic rules of streaming. We've seen a couple of companies adopt different models. We're now seeing this, right? And it's kind of like baby steps, because I think, right, there's a lot ideologically invested among listeners, among the press, among the broader public in like how these systems function. And I think that people don't want to assume that they're just sort of like a random, and not just don't want to assume, like earlier systems were structured by governmental intervention in ways that like created at least a seemingly stable marketplace. Like how much songwriters get paid is determined by a copyright rates board. ASCAP and BMI, the performing rights organizations, are like semi-governmental in as much as their activities are defined by consent decrees. Like there's a sense that like it shouldn't just Hollywood and is structured by these massive labor organizations, which again, it's not like anyone can just do whatever they want in terms of the payouts around these major artistic forms. And so I think that there's a lot of interest in like, there needs to be something feeling like it's vaguely fair, because for the industry, it's very important that it feels vaguely fair, because while musicians don't have a lot of power, they do have a lot of public support. And like Bruce Springsteen can call up a president. Like he just can, right? Bruce Springsteen can get the president on the phone, and like maybe he can't make a change, but there's a lot, like they've got a lot of cultural power. And if I think that, so it's very important for the record industry to like maintain at least a plausible sense that like this is a system with legitimacy, this is a system that's institutionalized, this is a system that's that major artists support, and that like isn't, that like has real heft, and there's a reason it exists. This is a system that exists, and it's like a system that's like not like, this is just something that we came up with randomly when we were like absolutely panicked in 2007 and we thought the sky was falling.
But them making it look like everything's all fair and game, the music industry was never born that way. It's been rigged since the jump. They're coming out with a bunch of albums after they die that sounds computer generated. At the end of the day, this industry was never to be made fair in the first place. But artists do have a lot of cachet with their fans. But I'm telling you, man, the record labels, they're gonna find any way to get an edge over the artist. I don't want to say the audience, it's mainly over the artist. They don't want guys going independent and then actually being successful and having other artists just upload their shit to DistroKid, go on tour, and make their own money, and all the labels are cut out. Once again, they basically 360 the game.
So it does seem that they're starting to remake this system, and they're doing it really carefully, and they're doing it with this artist first ideology that, like, I have a lot of distrust in, but like is being couched in specific terms. It's saying it's against garbage. It's right in all these ways where they're trying to remake streaming. And the question is what they're trying to remake it for. For someone like Lucian Grange, it's clearly so that
Lucian Grange, for all you don't know, he's basically almost the biggest head in music. That is the biggest head in the music industry. He's basically the I would say the alpha lion of the whole industry. Whatever he wants, he gets.
Blue chip artists make money from streaming because from an industry perspective, you could think about it that like streaming, you could argue that streaming and where the industry makes its money like have gotten maybe not a little out of sync, but have a potential for getting out of sync, right? Like you want streaming to support artists who then can go on tour forever and make money for decades, because that's like actually what the industry wants. And so
just going back to what you said earlier about like how like the stat we dropped even earlier this year, and what you said earlier about like how like these DIY distributors are starting to take like a larger cut of the streaming.
Well, yeah, and that too. They don't want that to happen, obviously, and they want to keep having their power over Spotify, and I think that they like want.
That's crazy. They're taking a large cut of the streaming that's like half a penny, a quarter of a penny. Jesus, this whole shit sounds like a mess. I knew it was a mess when Spotify had first started, and they equated 1,000 streams for an album being sold in the stores. When most artists today, we already know, they don't even have any idea of how it was to buy a CD from a store. There's guys right now that are 18, 20, that never ever at any point in their lives waited in line to walk to a store to buy a fucking CD. So why the hell they're going into a system that's equating their streams based off of that? That shows you right there that the whole shit from the beginning is based off of fraud.
So this is going to end up in a world where blue chip artists get paid out better, and like a select set of blue chip artists are able to like cut through the digital noise. Partially, I mean, and this is where I think it gets really interesting, because I don't think the music industry is fundamentally thinking about Spotify here or about streaming. I think they're getting ready for a number of
the same way they didn't think about YouTube. The same way they didn't think about YouTube. They could have had their own platform, but now they have to upload their shit to YouTube. The industry has always been late.
New conditions that are starting to emerge. And I think TikTok is one example of this kind of space. Like, it's important for the record industry to figure out a way that it can like create artists on TikTok, artists who have careers that look like musicians, that
instead of personality. You know what? TikTok basically took the Instagram famous rapper or just star and 10x'd it. Basically, you already know, like off rip through TikTok, this is not even music driven. This is almost 90% personality driven. You can see Cor Lorray. She's like one of the prime examples of that. Nothing has to do with the music. I mean, these guys are literally at music awards for what? You make like songs that are 1 minute and 50 seconds. This shit is oh man. Yo, to see how this is gonna play out, especially with TikTok, I'm telling you, TikTok threw the monkey wrench at the music industry, because now it's like people had a feeling that this this was a gimmick when Instagram came about, and you saw all these little artists that everyone knew couldn't rap or sing get famous. But now TikTok just it really put things into the forefront. People know, oh, you're just a TikTok artist. You're not really an artist.
Like the kinds of trajectories of careers that the record label is really good at organizing, and not that it looks like Reddit. You know what I mean? Where it's just like a whole bunch of like semi-anonymous user-generated activity. And
yeah, they're trying to basically have more of a hand in curating like what the next big artist is, instead of having to sort of pay attention to what's happening on like an app that another app that they don't really have any kind of control over, which I mean, as we said, they do have a little bit of control over TikTok, but there is a certain level of like randomness now about like what is the next big artist, who pops up, what becomes like popular. And I think they just want to have like more of a hand in that, more of a control over that. And like,
yeah, and at the same time, TikTok being a Chinese company, that may make things even more complicated. 'Cause I'm pretty sure behind the scenes with that, inside the inner workings, there's a lot bigger things at play than just a bunch of songs and just a bunch of dances. There's a lot of data being collected, and who knows who the fuck is even looking at that shit, analyzing to do what with it. So there's a lot of international, I would say, I don't want to say espionage, but politics into play with that. But the labels, at the end of the day, TikTok, man, it really threw the monkey wrench in their whole business model of rolling out an artist. It just made their whole business and product look so gimmicky. So it looks like it was recently announced that the finals for the 2026 World Cup is going to AT&T Stadium in Dallas, Texas. Woo! And the final two choices was between Giant Stadium and AT&T Stadium. Having the game at AT&T Stadium is way better, and I'm pretty sure for the transportation, it's going to be 10 times better. As a former New Yorker, trust me, going to the Meadowlands, especially during the Super Bowl, I didn't go, but I just know during the Super Bowl, here's the story for those of you who don't really live in the tri-state area of New York City. It was a mess. People were stuck there for hours, not only in transit, also in traffic. And just on a normal football game or just event like Summer Jam, that's like a hip hop concert that's out in New York every summer. When they used to have it out in the Meadowlands, it's a mess. Jersey traffic, all these fucking 75-cent tolls. Jersey always closes the roads. It's a mess. Thank God that they did not have the finals there, because it pretty much went viral after they had the Super Bowl. All the people that didn't really even get home to the next morning because the commute and just the overall setup out there in Jersey, it's just a mess. It's just a complete shit show. And shout out to Jerry's World, man. They get in the finals. That World Cup is gonna be lit. 3 countries: Mexico, US, Canada, Toronto, Houston, Dallas, Los Angeles, Chicago, Portland, Kansas City, Miami. Ooh, World Cup is going to be lit. As last year was my first time actually fully being out in Texas, and I gotta say, December weather, watching the World Cup, 2022 World Cup, it was pretty lit already. I was shocked of the soccer culture out here. It's pretty big, and I wish back home in NY, man, they had a setup like that where the arena is around. There's a bunch of bars. There's a bunch of soccer fields where people could play. Like, there's a whole like scene. New York doesn't have that because we're so dense. So, but by the time the stadium comes around, I believe out in Flushing in Queens, New York, they might have a stadium for the NYCFC team, but I'm not sure if they're gonna be hosting any games. That arena might not be big enough. But yeah, I'm excited. 2026 World Cup, I'm definitely gonna be out there in Dallas. But hey, I'm out here in Houston. It's gonna be lit out here, and it was already lit for the previous World Cup. So again, Texas surprises me all the time, but that is big news. I really thought that Azteca Stadium out in Mexico. I thought they were gonna get the finals, but hey, U.S. is making big strides, especially after having that World Cup in December in Qatar, which was kind of lit anyway. I gotta say, they surprised me with the way they hosted. Hey, they got the money to do so, but the way they had the arenas cool down, like they spent a lot of money. They spent a lot of money, but that's FIFA for you. So after many years, Kid Cudi looks like him and Kanye kind of made up. You know, he dropped his recent album. I still gotta check it out, but here's what he had to say.
The reason why we became cool again is because he apologized to me, and it was sincere. I was just like, wow, Kanye does not apologize to anyone. He doesn't say sorry to anyone.
Yo, Zane Lowe got to be a fucking therapist or something, man. How does everyone kind of reveal everything to Zane Lowe? I mean, is he smoking DMT with these guys out there in Cali, or is this like what's going on here, man? This guy get all the exclusives.
And you know, that's my brother, man. I know he loves me, and there's just nothing like Kanye and Cudi, you know. We like the duo that everybody loves to see, you know.
The chemistry, as you said, is undeniable.
Yeah,
it is. It's just
beyond the music.
Yeah,
you know?
it is. It goes beyond notes and melody and tempo and words. It's something very magic about that.
Yeah. The reason why.
Well, hopefully we get Kids See Ghost Part 2. Who knows? But yeah, Kanye kind of been all over the place. I think next time I'll play that clip with him kind of shutting down, what's that psycho's name, man? He's always on Joe Rogan's show, man. This guy's like conspiracy theory. He never shuts the fuck up. But Kanye was talking so crazy. He actually had dude lost for words. Like, that shit was hilarious. But I'll have that queued up for next time. Oh, man. But last but not least, I'm just gonna touch base on this, man. This migrant situation in NYC, boy. Oh my God. And I gotta plug this chick's channel, man. She actually went in on Mayor Adams out in NYC. But yo, what is going on? Like, first of all, they found housing for like 70,000 people. Like, they always say, like, housing, there's a shortage in NYC, but ever since this migrant situation came about, shit quickly opened up. All these buildings that were just empty in the middle of the city, like, they gotta have somebody come down and really inspect what's going on in NYC, because I know there's a tech company out there that's going around. They pretty much teamed up with a lot of, you know, commercial real estate owners. I shouldn't say commercial, more like just guys that deal with residential real estate, that own buildings, maybe own like 500 apartments. A corporation could own like multiple buildings. They team up with multiple different corporations. They put all of them in an algorithm, and they tell them when to put their apartments out into the marketplace. So there's literally high rises out in NYC right now where most of them are empty, and they don't put the apartments in the market at all. Like, one of the neighborhoods I lived out in Brooklyn, Crown Heights, going through major gentrification, they had like multiple buildings come up by me, and these buildings stay empty for a year, and then in 1 month the whole thing was rented out. Like, I was like, well, what is this? And then later, that's when I learned about I gotta bring that up, man. I'll pull that up for next time. There's a company that just created an algorithm. Like, they're working with all these these property owners, and they're letting them know, hey, don't put those 20 apartments into the marketplace. We already have guys pricing it here. Maybe release 1 or 2, and they plug all this into an algorithm. They let them know when to put the apartments out. It's like everyone's in communication. So it's like, in a way, the real estate market in New York City, when it comes to residential, it's pretty much, the demand is completely fake. The apartments are there. They may not be there for everyone that's looking for an apartment. Prices are still somewhat going to be high, but prices are not $5,000 to $6,000 as the average, they're not that high. They're not that high. Once again, they found housing for 70,000 migrants, temporary housing, empty buildings in the middle of Midtown. Like, that's kind of one thing that I'm surprised more people haven't talked about. It's like, how did they may not have found housing for everybody, for all the migrants, but they found housing for at least 70,000 migrants. Even though some of them sleeping on the floor, the point is that they had space. And in New York City, we're always seeing homeless, especially in the train stations, lingering around. It's bad. It's even getting bad downtown, which is crazy. And it's like, the whole time they had the space. So they only waited to an emergency that made them look bad if they had women and children sleeping outside, that all of a sudden they just popped up and found the housing. So once again, in New York City, for those of you I know that's suffering, looking for a place to live, looking for an apartment that's not $4,000 a month in the middle of the hood, where you knew when you look at your Citizen app, you're like, damn, somebody just got their shit blown off right in the middle of this block a week ago, and my next door neighbor doesn't even pay for hot water or fucking he doesn't pay for hot water or fucking heat, but yet they're charging me for all the utilities, including hot water and heat. And this apartment is fucking, and this whole like building is built in fucking 1940. Like, there's a lot of that going on, man. Like, I got stories for days of some of these apartments that I visited, boy. They would, my God, it is rough. It is rough, but the inventory is really there. They're just disguising it. They're building these buildings and they're staying empty for months. And I guess when that algorithm company hits them up, it's like, hey, go ahead and toss some of these apartments out there. So it is what it is, man. You guys stay strong. But until next time, I'm definitely doing another one of these. You guys stay safe out there. Peace.